Sarah, I am super excited to have this conversation today. So you and I were talking a couple weeks ago at the Women of the FPA event, and we were talking about the lack of females and diversity in this profession. And one of the things we were talking about, and we said we don't have all the answers, but we think it is exposure. We need to expose women to the success they can have in this profession. And one of the things I told you is you have to share this journey. You have to tell people where you've been and where you've gotten to and where you're going. So I'm really excited for you to record this and have this conversation. I hope some woman out there that's thinking about this profession hears this and hears your journey. But I'm also excited to have Amanda join us, especially with Amanda being one of our newest team members and being an additional female to the staff. But Amanda's been here for the success journey. And I have to believe that one of the reasons why you're here is because of Sarah and what she's done here. And I think one of the most unique parts about your journey is you started out wanting to be a financial planner. One of the things we talked about at that event was part of the problem is a lot of the women in profession are not financial planners, right? And I personally think that 80% of CFP professionals should be female just because of the characteristics. And according to CFP board, a little less than 1/3 of our profession right now, our actual CFP board, CFP certificate holders are female. So we want to expose them to that, but I think there's also leadership roles. And I think the fact that you're the number 2 person in our company in terms of leadership speaks volumes of what women can do in this profession. So Sarah, to tell this story, let's start out at the very beginning. So you started with our firm, I think roughly 5 years ago?
Yeah, we started talking in November of 2018, so almost 5 years ago.
Well, we started talking when you officially accepted my offer after turning me down first. When was that?
January.
Yeah.
Sounds like our dating journey.
Yeah. And I know what the conversation was because Pitt was going to its first ACC championship game. So I remember driving down in the car and having a phone conversation trying to woo you over to the company. So one of the things we talked about at that time was you were at another planning firm and you'd spent some time at some of the bigger regional banks. And you'd actually changed 5 jobs in 6 years, or is it 6 jobs in 5 years?
I think it was 5 and 6, something like that. It was.
So Amanda and I are over here, we're interviewing you. And both of us are like, we don't want to hire her. Do you remember this?
I do. I think the girl has a pattern. So that's not good.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's literally telling me, do not hire her. She has a pattern. So we're talking to our hiring consultant. And he said, she's the white elephant. You have to hire her. I said, okay. So I go out and I have a conversation with you. And you turn me down. And I call him. I say, see, Amanda and I said this wasn't the right direction to go to. He said, here's probably what you said. Here's probably what she said. And I'm sitting there thinking my phones are tapped at this point. Here's what you're going to call her and say. And so that was that second conversation when I was on my way to Charlotte for the ACC championship. So tell me a little bit about where you were at, your state of mind. Can you tell me a little bit about why you were fearful of coming here and what made you change your mind?
Yeah. So I was approached by a recruiter for the old our old broker-dealer at the time. I wasn't actively looking to leave my job. I was happy where I was at. I was doing good, in my career, and finally had been there for a little bit. I had good clientele, and I was happy. And a recruiter reached out to me, and she said, "Oh, I have a little bit of a different position I think you might be interested in." And I'm always willing to hear what people have to offer. And so, after our first meeting, I was like, okay. I was working in the bank at the time. So I had been in banking. I was familiar with banking. I love banking. I was passionate about it. After my first interview with you, I was like, okay, this is a one-man shop. Like, this guy went out on his own and started his own company just like what was not even 2 years ago. It was maybe 2 years ago, almost on the dot. And I was like, that's scary.
Yeah.
I was like, nope, I'm good. I'm good where I'm at. I'm happy. I'm making good money. I'm doing what I love. I'm passionate. And I was like, I'm good. I'm just gonna, no, thank you. Thanks, but no thanks. So it was scary. I was scared. I was like, I don't want to go work what if this guy's business fails? What if he's only 2 years into this? Then I'm out of a paycheck. And so, yeah, that was kind of the first part of it. And then, I think when you reached back out maybe a week later, and I got a voicemail. It was a 2-minute and 30 second long voicemail, by the way. If anyone that knows Greg Fear knows, that's a pretty standard. I still
That's a short.
well, voicemail, but yeah, I still have it, by the way. I saved it because I was like, oh, wow. And I remember listening to it out loud, and I was with my husband and fiance at the time, and he was like, I think you need to go work for this guy. And I was like, what? Are you serious? And he was like, yeah, I mean, he said, listen to like all the nice things that he said. And like, he just seems genuine. And I think this could really present some opportunities for you down the road. And I of course believed in Baratung's vision. You know, I was like, wow, this is really great, but it was scary.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I know what you mean.
Yeah, right.
I was also scared.
Right. You're like, I believe in my husband,
Yeah.
but man, it was scary. And so I'm like, okay, if everything that this guy says comes true, like this could be really awesome. And I believe in what Baratung's doing and what Greg's doing. And so it kind of, honestly, it took my husband saying like, I think you should go work for this guy. And I was like, okay, well, if I don't get a paycheck one week, I'm relying on you, you know? So
if I'm a younger woman and I'm listening to this, the first thing I heard in there, a key to your success, becoming in senior leadership of a firm, was you were willing to take on opportunities. Mm-hmm. One of my good friends always says, you're one relationship away from changing your life. You're one conversation away from changing your life. So that openness to talking to a recruiter, which, by the way, wasn't even a recruiter we were using, right?
Yeah,
it was
right.
just somebody else who said, hey, we hire for this position and this person might be a good opportunity, right? So you're one relationship away. So I think that's the first step that I'm hearing in your success journey is being open to change, right? But so you talk about this fear and you talk about believing, but there's another leap of faith that I think is really important here, because one of the things we've always done at Baratung is we will never offer somebody higher compensation than their current compensation to come over here. Because one of the things we believe in is we want people that are motivated by our vision, that are motivated by our culture, and not motivated by material things. And material things are nice, don't get me wrong. And so one of the things we structured in your offer, and I don't know if you remember this, you actually made less money than your current firm. But one of the things we structured was a bonus that if you did well, and by well, it was living our core values, you could make the same amount of money. But one of the things I cast to you was a vision of the future of how we would put together a growth plan for you. That was part of that voicemail, right? To get you
So a lot of parts of that
to where
voicemail.
she wanted to be was a financial planner, which that was your goal at that point in life, was to be a financial planner. And keep in mind, too, we hired you as an administrative assistant. So at that point in time, you were starting entry level, which was great, but from where you were currently at. So you took a step down in terms of pay. You took a step down in terms of positioning. Tell me about what that felt like, and tell me about why you did that.
it really was just a leap of faith. You know, I said, okay, if everything comes, you know, comes to reality, what Baratung is wanting to do and what Greg is saying and what he envisions Baratung being in 5-10 years from now, I said, this could be a really great move for me, like to fulfill what I wanted to do, let alone financially. Because I was making good money where I was and it was a different structure of compensation, but, I did take a step back in position and, financials, as far as compensation. But I said, this guy is saying, hey, if we achieve what we're trying to achieve, you'll make more money than you would have at the bank in 5 years. And I was like, all right, we'll see, you know?
So that was, and by the way, that was your husband. It wasn't any of the interviews. It was based upon what the information you were relying to him.
Yeah.
But he believed in it too, right?
He did. He was like, I don't know, this guy seems pretty sincere and it'd be a really good opportunity. At the time, the bank that I was at, I really was I had hit my cap, like where as far as position wise, like I had showed interest in becoming a financial planner. There really wasn't a path for it. And they were like, hey, here, you're saying, a licensed banker, basically is what it was.
So your growth was capped where you were.
Yeah. They were, I was like, I really want to be a financial planner. This is what I want. And they're like, well, there's not exactly a path for that. And I was like, well, that kind of stinks. But I was happy. I loved what I did. I loved helping my clients. And so there was, Baratung and Greg was offering this opportunity for me to achieve my dream of being a financial planner, or so I thought.
So if I'm hearing you correct, and again, if I'm a young female that's listening to this, so the next step and path of your journey, if I'm hearing you correctly, was you were willing to take a risk,
Yes.
a leap of faith.
Yeah.
And what I have found in my experience has been, if you're not willing to take a leap of faith, you're never going to climb a bigger mountain, right? So if you want to climb Everest, you got to take on some risks. So that was the one thing I heard in there. But the other thing that I heard in there is that you were following a vision. And one of the things that Amanda and I talked about when I had to have this conversation with her about my leap of faith of leaving the corporate world and taking our whole life savings and starting a company.
I mean, yeah, it was like, we can do this, and then maybe we're going to move into your mom's basement. And I was like, all right, I don't know if I really want to do that, but all right.
But when you have that leap of faith, when you're going after a vision or a preferred better future, which, by the way, when we're doing financial planning with clients, that's all we're trying to help them do, is to go for a better vision of what they perceive their future to be and their goals and aspirations. So, and I don't want to paraphrase what you were saying, but I'm going to try to say the best. And correct me where I'm on this. You were saying at the bank you were at, in the previous firms, because we kept asking you, we took you to dinner with your husband. Remember, we're like, we want to double check this. Like, why has she changed so many firms? Amanda was so worried about it. She goes, I just don't, this dinner's not going to go well. But one of the things we talked about this is.
Food was excellent.
Yeah, food was good.
Just thinking back.
It was good. It was,
Shout out to
It was
Santa
an
Colo.
Italian place. Yeah.
Santa Colo, North Huntington.
Really good.
but there has to be a clearly spelled out vision you can believe in.
Yeah.
And the previous firms you were with, you said they treated you well. They didn't have bad culture. You liked the culture places, but there was nothing to say, this is where we're going in the future. And so the way I explained it to you when you were first coming on, and when I was growing up, we had a timeshare back when timeshares were timeshares, right? You had to go the same time, same place, right? The day after Christmas, we all hopped into a van and went to Disney and traveled 20 some hours, 4 children and 2 adults in a minivan, listening to Zig Ziglar for 20 some hours. And heaven forbid we take a rest stop more than we need to, right? So I was willing to do that because I knew what the destination was.
I was not sure where he was going with that, but okay, he really brought it back. Okay.
I guess you've never, but most of the people in the firm have heard this story 1,000 times.
I mean, I've heard it. Okay.
So the destination was Disney. I knew I was going to the magic place. Yeah. So I was willing to endure my brother's foot in my face and all those things. But if my dad just threw me in a van and I had to sit there for 20 hours not knowing how long it was going to be, not having Zig Ziglar to lullaby me to sleep, that'd probably be a stinky journey. I would still end up the same place. So Sarah, just talk a little bit about that, because you and I have had this conversation so much about the vision of where we were going at that time, which you had to take as leap of faith, and now we're starting to see come to fruition. So talk about what that leap of faith felt like.
Yeah. And just to kind of bring it all together, it's just so crazy to think that it's been 4 years, and what we've done in 4 years, looking back. Like when I joined, it was literally you, and I think another associate had just joined, like he was another advisor. But just, I was like, man, I'm going from working in corporate, like banking with like this whole big team to just this one guy. And, he's got these big dreams and he's all over the place. I'm like,
Yes.
So, by the way, I just got to bring this up. So it just brought a fond memory back to my brain. So I don't know if you remember, the first interview with Amanda and myself was in our Baritone East that we're at now, in a small conference room.
And who else was
you
there?
had Abby there.
We had my daughter
Abby
there.
was in her.
She was
in her
like
car seat.
3 or 4 months old.
Yeah.
Because when you have a small business, you don't have a babysitter, you have to figure it out, right? But what's crazy is I cast the vision of this empty space. It's the same thing when I walked through this door originally. I saw the studio we're in now.
Yeah.
I saw that education center. And what's crazy is this week, we're in our studio.
Yeah.
So it just dawned on me. We're having this conversation about your first interview in the same building when I had to tell you what we're in right now is a dream, and that dream came to reality. But the only reason why that dream came to reality is because you believed in it and you took that leap of faith, because if it was just me, I'll tell you this wasn't going to happen. And if it was just the two of us together, that wasn't going to happen. Our marriage probably would have survived that, right?
No.
That's just such a fond memory that just like, it's like almost like a deja vu moment, just like smacked me in the face.
It's really weird. It's wild to think about. Like we just seeing all the progress that we've made on this expansion, like you said, the studio, the education center, and our team. Like going from you, me, and another like advisor to 4 years later, and there's 11 of us. Like that's huge.
So I'm a young woman that's looking to grow.
Hold on just a second. Why do you keep saying young? Just out of curiosity.
Because if we want to change this profession, it's a lot harder to get career changers. And so I think that exposing people that are in high school and exposing people that are in college, it doesn't mean you could be somebody that's changing careers and developing. But I think really why, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you and I have had this conversation multiple times. I want some other young lady, that's thinking about taking a leap of faith to hear this story so that they're exposed to this journey because they could do the same thing.
Right. I agree with you. But also I think it should be known that anyone can do this, young,
Amen.
old, or anywhere in the middle. Oprah did an interview with Meghan and Harry a couple years ago, and Meghan said, if you can see it, you can be it. So if you don't see it, it doesn't seem as attainable. And that always stuck with me. So I don't know, just exposure, like you said.
Exposure. We talked about this at Baritone University. So one of our professors, Dozie, came in and talked about these 4 E's. And I still feel it's one of the most life-changing methods I've ever seen. And every time when you want somebody to change, it has to start with exposure. And we talk about this. Instagram can be bad, but Instagram can be really good if you're trying to lose weight and you follow healthy people and running, and that's all you look at, right? It's that exposure. That's why dream boards work. So for any person that's out there that's hearing this story, right? When do you know, when you're in that situation and you're sitting here and there's a guy that can't even afford a babysitter sitting there trying to get you to come there, right? How do you know to take that leap of faith? How do you know when to follow your heart? And how do you overcome those fears?
That's a tough one because I just felt it. Obviously my fiance at the time husband now said, having his input's always very important to me. We're a team. Every decision we do, big ones we do together, and so that was important. But also just for myself, like I have always been very independent. I've always been very career driven, and my career has been my baby. I was just talking about this morning with a colleague, and I was like, this could be, and you think I was very self-aware. I knew I had jumped ship a bunch of places. I was like, I don't want to do that again. I had finally been back with the bank almost a couple years, and I plan on just staying there forever. I'm like, I'm never leaving again. The last time I left, what happened? And so I believed in what you had talked about and believed in Baritone and believed in the vision that you were casting. And I said, I told myself, like, I can be a part of helping this come to life. And I am just...
Well, you have.
Yeah,
you really have.
Thanks. But I almost like take it as a responsibility. And you and I've talked about this. Like I have always considered like Baritone as my company, and it's not, I'm not an owner in the company, but I've always treated it like that.
That's the key of this whole journey conversation because we're in the process of making you an owner.
Yeah.
And that wouldn't have happened if you wouldn't have done this, right?
Yeah.
You think deep down you knew like you needed something that would push you? You said you were happy, you were doing well financially, you liked it, but you knew there wasn't anywhere to go.
Yeah.
And maybe you would have been happy for maybe like a little longer, but at some point you wanted to do the next thing, or you knew you could do so much more.
Yeah.
So even though it was scary, I think maybe deep down you knew you had to do it.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. And just if you like looking at my history, when I got bored or when I was, didn't have something to look forward to, is kind of, I noticed I would jump ship.
Yeah.
And now I've worked for Baritone longer than I've worked for any company altogether.
Well, Greg's favorite thing to say, and it's also one of my favorite things, and it's so true. The goal is always to what? Be fully known, fully loved, and fully challenged. And if you're not those three things, and so the third one you weren't going to get,
And we could talk for about 7 hours
About that.
about how deep fully known, fully loved, and fully challenged is and why it's one of the bedrocks of our firm. It's so grateful for Tim Keller teaching that lesson to us.
Yeah.
So Sarah, in this journey, if I'm hearing you correctly, if I'm listening to this, it sounds like you're saying that when you believe, you know. It's almost like somebody saying when you marry someone, how do you know when you're in love? You just know. So if I'm hearing you correctly, if I'm a younger person or somebody that's looking to make a change, when I know to make that leap of faith, I will know at that point in time.
Yeah.
But when you know it, jump in. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. And you just feel it in your heart. You know, if you can see yourself involved in that, if you can see yourself like, wow, I can see myself being a part of that. I can see myself helping to make a difference and be a part of this vision. That's when you're like, okay.
So Sarah,
gotta do
this
this.
is totally side note to the script. But how many times have you and I been in meetings with other financial planners? Because you know, my wife always says one of her biggest fears is we go to a dinner party and Greg finds out there's another financial planner there, because I'll leave the rest of the night. Like I love
Just
talk.
really gets boring.
Yeah.
That's all I want to do is talk financial planning, right?
Bye, Amanda.
So you and I are constantly around other financial planners, right? And how many times they say, I wish I just had a Sarah.
The amount of times I've heard people say that, not even directly to me, but I've overheard it, I can't even tell you how many times.
And one of the things that I always say is, what are you doing to find a Sarah? And what are you doing to develop a Sarah? We always
Develop
talk
a
about
Sarah.
one of the books you introduced me to. I mean, I've been introducing you to books the entire time you've been here, but one of my favorite books you introduced me to is Fred Factor. And Freds, you attract Freds, and you take Freds and you multiply Freds, right? And so I think that's what's funny is they haven't cast any type of plan for that person. They're not putting out any honey to attract the bears, and they're wondering why they don't have any bears to look at, right? So I think that's just an interesting thing. And we've tried to just go back and say, how do we attract you? How do we repeat you? So everything we've done to pivot in the last year and a half has been around how do we attract more Sarahs? And more importantly, how do we develop more Sarahs, which actually brings me to my favorite part here. And this is the pivot, right? So we bring you in here, and what I'm holding here, if you don't know what this is the Baratung Advisors Administrative Assistant Growth Plan. And so one of the things we do here for every team member is we have a growth plan. And so you just got your growth plan, and it does a 30-day, 60-day, 90-day, 180-day, 1 year, 3 year, and 5 year strategy. And I love this. It says at year 3, transition into a financial advisor role. Year 5, help hire and train replacement. Transition into a full-time financial advisor role. And as I look through these things, it's just so funny to me when I see what the 30 days, the 60 day, and the 90 days of where you're at here, of what our growth plan was. But just like we tell clients all the time, we put a plan together to pursue our goals. But that doesn't mean our goals don't change. Just like if you go to a sporting event, you change your plan at halftime, it's not working. So Sarah, I believe, and you would probably know better than me this, but if I remember correctly, it was right around 1 year mark is where we made a major pivot in here. So for those that aren't familiar with our firm, we review this. At this time was quarterly. Now I believe we do it every 6 months is when we update their growth plan instead of just doing it every quarterly review. And we're sitting down, and I knew before you even knew, but I said, it seems like you don't want to be a financial advisor anymore. And you were scared to admit it to me at first because you were afraid that it would stymie your career development.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we talked about was we just need to redo your growth plan. And looking back upon it, you've told me this while we're having this conversation, it's one of the best decisions you ever made in your life. So tell me, like, just walk me through this journey. What was going on in your head? Tell me a little bit about that conversation. What made you pivot? And I think the biggest part at the end of this is, do you believe, had you not made this pivot, you would be where you're at today?
So I think so we sat down, we were having this conversation because I'm going to out myself here, but I couldn't pass my Series 7. And I had gotten other licenses.
By the way, I didn't want to read that, but it says 30 days, the first bullet point, enroll in a Series 7 and Series 65 training. And then 90 days says take Series 7 exam, which is the funny part about this is we were just on this conversation, one of our team members go to get their 7. And they're sitting there saying it needs to be 30 hours a week. And he's studying. I'm like, no wonder why you couldn't pass it. Because according to them, this is not a successful route. So
Yeah.
It's funny looking back on this.
It is. And I don't mind, you know, I'm being realistic for everybody out there. I couldn't pass my Series 7. And I'm telling you, like, I studied and I really did. I wanted to pass it because I said, I can't go any farther. I can't take the next step of my career until I pass this. And so I'm very hard on myself. I was mad at myself. I just felt like I was letting Greg down. Like I can't do any, I couldn't do certain tasks without having this license. And so we're having this conversation, and I think my biggest fear, and I didn't want to admit it because I was like, this was the path I came to follow. If I don't get this and I don't get my 7 and I can't become an advisor, like I'm never going to move forward. And so I was like crushed. I'm like,
And this is
telling
a year
myself that. Yeah.
after you just told yourself you can't change firms again, right? If I remember this correctly.
Yeah.
And this is a year after you just took a major leap of faith
Yeah. It was
to
scary.
follow this path.
It was scary. I was like, you're failing. Like that's how it felt in my head. And I just remember you brought it up. You said, you don't want to be a financial planner. And I was like, how'd you know that? I didn't say that to you. How'd you know that? And
Your body did.
and yeah.
Your facial expressions.
Well, and I remember you said, like, I just see where you're passionate. Like, you're so passionate and happy when you're helping other people. And he's like, and Greg said to me, he said, that's what you want to do. Let me guess. You want to be a financial planner because you love helping others, right? I said, yes. And he said, you like the idea of flexibility that you see that financial planners have with their schedule and just, what they do. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, and you probably see that they make a lot of money. And I was like, yeah, that all sounds great. Money, flexibility, and helping other people, mainly helping other people. That's what I care about the most. And he's like, you can do have all of those things without being a financial planner in this industry. And I was like, well, tell me more. And I never wanted to be
in this.
What's that?
In this
profession. In this profession. Yes. Sorry. And
I can't let that go.
I know. Well, you've been saying financial advisor. So
because but no, that's an awesome point. So it's like, as you watch how this firm has developed the journey, if we were on our team right now and somebody called themselves a financial advisor, I'd correctly say, you're a financial planner, right? But this is, what was it? We said
4 years ago.
4 years ago.
Financial advisor.
And everything in here said financial advisor.
Yep.
It's funny looking back the journey where we've become. So,
but yeah. And so that was really eye-opening to me. And you said you can do those things within the profession without being a financial planner. I don't see that passion in you when you're talking about Series 7 related stuff. I'm like, no, it's terrible. I don't care about the stocks. I don't care about the stock market. Like, I just want to help people. I want to help people achieve their goals. And so that's when you said, okay, well, what about leadership? And I was like, oh. Leadership in my mind at that time was what I had known was management. It was management. I had known corporate banking structure, manager.
That's a really good way to explain it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I never wanted to be a manager.
Right.
Ever. I was like, nope, I don't want to manage people. I don't want to be be someone's boss. I just don't want to do that. But then seeing the difference between a leader and a manager, I was like, oh, I do want to lead people.
Right.
I want to be, that'd be awesome. And so that's when Greg said, let's develop you as a leader.
that's when we took this
And we
said,
bye.
let's create a new one, right?
Yep.
And we did. And we started saying, what does that look like? So we said, let's get you connected with a leadership development group.
Yep.
So that was when you joined a mastermind group.
All 3 leadership.
That's when we started working on doing affirmation statements to build the confidence in you. And saying, I am a leader of a financial planning firm. I help grow and develop financial planners. And that's really where we started taking that journey. And I remember one of the things that when you first started, we do quarterly book reports here, right? And we have to expose you to leadership development. We were talking about that. You exposed me to Fred Factor. But one of the things we started doing was forcing you to journal, right? And that was not something you liked, right? I think you liked that about as much as taking a Series 7, right?
It just wasn't, it didn't come natural to me.
Yeah.
I didn't think about it to do it. And just all of the development and leadership that was, I don't want to say forced upon me, but it was
It was like kindly forced.
It was, but I was so appreciative of it too.
Yeah.
At the same time, it wasn't like, I was like, wow, this is really great. Like reading these books, because I wasn't a big reader before I came here. I hadn't read a book since high school before I came here. And, just having someone tell me like, look, I want to help you be a better leader. This is how you're going to do it, and learning those things, and just, it has helped my confidence. And I think my leadership and just myself as a person be better and help others better.
So one of the things you told me about when we've talked about this in the past, that really just is one of the things that I think everyone out there needs to hear, is you said what made you get past that point when you said you were not a reader and you weren't a leader and all those other negative head trash you were saying was that we spoke over you. Mm-hmm. Powerful mantras. You are a leader and we believed in you. And one of the things you said is nobody had ever even shown that as an option for you. And so can you tell us about that past experience and why that mental shift was so important?
Yeah, that I mean, it's been life changing to have someone speak over you, to tell you like you are a leader, and just reading these books that say like you are a leader. Doesn't matter what your title is. It doesn't matter what your position is, how many college degrees you have, or what what designations you have. Like everyone is a leader, whether I mean, you guys know this, but the world may not realize I didn't go to college. And that was always something that weighed on me. I always said, I am not as good as everybody else. I don't have a college degree. No one wants to look at me and think, oh, I'm going to listen to what Sarah has to say, So just having that spoke over me, like, you're a leader. You don't need a piece of paper that says, hey, you're a great leader, has just made such a difference. And anyone who hasn't had experience, in the corporate setting and corporate world, if you don't have managers or leaders or people like around you that have that same mindset and have that the belief in you, there's no one sitting there telling all of their 20,000 bank employees, you're all leaders. It just, and that, that's okay. It's just a different mindset. But when you come to a smaller firm and you're surrounded by, say, 2 people at the time, and now it's 11, but everyone works together, and we have one job, and that at the end of the day, we are all doing that same job. We're the same person doing the same job. We're all leaders. Mm-hmm. It changes you.
And Sarah, I think one of the powerful things you told me about this, because one of the things we've been trying to do is recreate your leadership development strategy so that we can empower other people, right? And so we've been talking a lot about this in your journey. But one of the things you said, it's not just enough to have that mentor that believes in you and speaks over you. They also have to, we talk about fully known, fully loved, and fully challenged. So one of the things you said was, the second that I decided you were going to be a leader in this firm, what did I start doing? I started absolutely making you feel uncomfortable and challenging you.
Sure did.
So the one story that I love here is when I made you do your first quarterly review, right? So one of the things we do is I teach you how to do something, and then I tell you to go do it on your own. And then if you make a mistake, it's okay, but don't rely on me.
Yeah.
I want you to make a mistake, right? If you don't let them fall, they're not going to learn how to get back up. So the one was that you were, I believe, was like having a panic attack over, if I'm correct about this.
Yeah.
Was, you know where I'm going with this, was the first hire. So I said, one of the things you need to do is you have to make the decision to hire. In this conversation, I said, if this person's a successful hire, it's 100% you. But also, if this person's a complete failure, it's also 100% you.
It was terrifying.
And you were terrified.
Yeah.
I mean, to the point of like, I thought I was going to actually lose you as a team member, right? But at the end of the day, I couldn't coddle you.
Yeah.
Now, that actually ended up being, outside of yourself, the best hire decision we ever made. And I told you, you're batting at a higher success rate now with the last few hires you've had than I've ever had in my entire career going past when I started this firm. But the reality is, had I not put you in that position to take ownership of it, you weren't a leader, you were a follower. So tell me about this, because we've had this conversation so many times and why this was such a crucial point in your journey.
You're constantly making me uncomfortable and pushing me. I mean, this is uncomfortable.
Right?
Doing things like this, and I don't want the attention on me. I want to sit in my little corner and do my thing. But so in that example, I'm thankful for that, because now I am so much more comfortable. I mean, and I remember you telling me we're having these interviews, and you're like, Sarah, they want the job here. And I'm like, I'm going to mess this up. He's like, you can't mess it up. They're trying to get the job here. Like, what? Why are you so worried? And I'm like, oh, this is just so stressful. I mean, panic. And, but now it's like one of my favorite things to do. I love like getting to know new people and like seeing how I can help people grow more, and having like, harder conversations is easier now. And that was just something I was never comfortable with before. So as much as I hate to admit it, I am thankful that you pushed me out of my comfort zone with.
But I also pushed you out of your comfort zone. So based upon your skill set that we'd identified in your growth plan,
Yeah.
and based upon the trajectory we were trying to get you in your growth plan, right?
Yeah.
And so it wasn't just about making you uncomfortable in a situation you weren't equipped at. We follow Entrepreneur Operating System, EOS here, and we always talk about get it, want it, and capacity to do it. You had the capacity to do it. You got it. I just had to get that spark of you wanting it. So the two things I heard in that recent dialogue there, if I'm sitting here and I'm listening to this and I'm trying to learn from this, is it's important to get a mentor. Mm-hmm. But what I heard in there, and I hear so much, and I've experienced myself, is what you're saying is you only get a mentor because a mentor chooses you because of what you put into it. Mm-hmm. So often, we're hearing young leaders or leaders that are trying to redevelop themselves, and they're talking about, how do I get a mentor? And what they're trying to talk about is, how do I get, instead of looking at what I give. And the reason why this changed for you was because of what you were doing, because you excelled at every part of your job. It wasn't just all of a sudden you came in and there was a birthright, or you were some type of blue blood or whatever it was. It was because of your work ethic and what you did that you showed potential. And I think that's a key thing, that if you're looking to grow, stop looking for the reasons why not and start looking for the reasons why, is what I heard in here. Mm-hmm. But the other thing I heard in here is to constantly be uncomfortable with your growth plan, which leads us to where we're at today. And part of why we're doing this is because we sat down and reconstructed our firm. So we went through the Entrepreneur Operating System, and we did an accountability chart. And for those that aren't familiar with that, we fire everyone in the company. We build the company back up from scratch. And when we did this, we moved you into, as we call, Director of Operations, your official title, but internally we refer to you as integrator, which is the EOS language, right? So there's a visionary and integrator, which essentially means that your hand is in every cookie jar. And this company, the lights don't stay on, which is scary because we're looking at you going on maternity leave right now. But the lights don't stay on if it's not for you. You're really the most important role in the entire company if you study EOS. And we're also in the process, it's going to be a little bit longer than I'd like, just because we have other priorities right now, but we've identified that we're going to make you an owner of this company and build a lot of that in from a succession planning, which is something that's very vitally important, not only to me and Amanda through marriage, being an owner, and the other business partners, that you're recognized for that talent. But we're looking back on this, and you look back this entire journey, and it's just getting started. We're on our way to the 412 vision, and we're just getting started. But what's that one thing you could say to somebody that's entering a company at an entry level that wants to work their way up to the top levels of the company? If you had to boil it down to one thing, what is it?
Oh,
It's honest. That's an easier answer than I thought it was going to be. You need to think like you're an owner. You need to, everything that you do, you need to think, okay, how does this, what I'm going to do today, affect Baratung? If I do this, how does this affect Baratung? How does this affect our vision, or whatever, insert company here. You've got to think like an owner. This was my baby. We said this morning. Baratung has been my baby for over 4 years, and I am terrified to leave on maternity leave because now I have another baby, and I'm like, what am I going to do? This has been my baby for 4 years, and my career has always been my baby, and now I have a human baby, and it's just, but you just have to think like an owner. Like, what would I do if this was 100% my company and my livelihood relied on Baratung? Like, and I mean, every decision, fine, even buying pens, like
top to bottom,
right? Top to bottom, every decision
when
you
I
make.
buy these ridiculously expensive microphones.
Yeah, every purchase you make, I'm like, Greg.
But what's funny in there that so we did a little brief conversation before this of some of the stuff we're going to talk about, and pretty much everything up to this point you knew I was going to talk about or had conversations with me. Mm-hmm. But I've never asked you that particular question. And I'm putting you in an uncomfortable situation by asking you to share this journey because you and I agreed. You have to share this journey. If one person hears this and it changed their life, it was worth spending the time on this.
Yeah.
But your reaction there, right? But you know what the thing is? I knew she knew the answer because I knew what her answer was going to be because that has been her key to success. And that's the problem. Everyone wants to have an employer mentality. And there's been times where you've literally said, don't increase my pay. Spend it in a company. Go and hire somebody else so we can grow and follow that vision. And you also I was doing the same thing for myself. I was never asking you to do anything, but I also never asked you to do it. You did it. And that is why today you're becoming an owner in this company is because you had that mindset. And what I see is somebody that was telling themselves to get rid of that head trash and follow a dream. So Sarah, thank you so much. I know how difficult this was for you to share this journey. I don't know who out there in the world that God placed in our hearts to overcome this fear, but thank you for sharing that story with us because somebody's life will be impacted. There's somebody that's going to pursue their goals and live a fulfilling life because of you. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you.